All right, hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Second Chance Overland. It is once again time to work on the full-size Jeep project, the Grand Wagoneer. Now, in the last episode, you saw that I started to do the oil pan reseal and I was going to replace the rear main, but I found that the main bearings were not in that good a shape. So while I'm trying to decide what to do there, I'm going to move on to some other things here. So still trying to figure out what to do on this. So if you haven't seen that video, check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. Check that out and tell me what you think I should do. Leave me a comment on that. But for right now, I have been sitting on this lift kit for this thing for a while now. As you can see, I've got the axles out. The springs are still in. These are the original springs. Some of the bolts are frozen in, so I'm gonna have to cut those off. So I'm gonna go ahead and start working on getting these bolts out, finish removing these leaf springs and shackles, and just kind of move on to something different. I've been fighting with this engine issue for a little while now, and I just don't know what to do yet. So moving on to something else. Hopefully I can actually get something completed for once on this thing instead of just causing more issues. And yeah, so let's see if we can get these old springs out and actually make some progress on this thing for once. All right, let's go. All right, so I got the old leaf springs out. The fronts really were not that big of a deal. Yes, I did have to cut the rear bolt out of the hanger on the frame, but that was pretty straightforward, really. It was just getting a big enough wheel to get in there far enough to cut the bolt, and that was pretty much it. So that was all good. The rear, on the other hand, that was a different story. But finally got it. It did take some time. But on the rear, you've got this piece here. Right up in this hole there is where the bolt comes through on the inside. So you've got the bolt that goes here through the shackle and into here. And with that bolt seized on both sides, that was a pain. But as you can see, we finally got them. All the leaf springs are out. And it was definitely a lot of work. So anyways, I do have all new bolts for all of it, all new shackles, and of course new leaf springs, lift kit. Here's some of the parts here. Lift blocks for the rear, U-bolts, shocks, brake lines, and then over there I've got the actual springs. So anyways, that was a lot of work, but at least it's progress, right? So I'm gonna get started working on trying to put these new springs in. Now the fun part is that the rear axle is spring over axle, meaning that the springs sit on top of the axle, and the front is spring under. So the axle actually sits on top of the springs. So not exactly easy to do. Yeah, I can't really lift the front axle onto the springs at this point, at least not by myself. So it's gonna be a bit fiddly getting that handled, but we'll figure it out. So all right, let's get to work on this. All right, so the instructions from Rusty's actually say to put the frame side in first. So the first thing I'm gonna do here real quick is I'm gonna bolt the new shackle to the rear of the rear spring. I'm starting on the rear, I don't know why, it was just here. I think it'd be easier. But yeah, so I'm gonna start here. I'm gonna start by bolting the new shackle to the new spring, and then the spring will go up. We're gonna do the forward mount first, and then we can actually lift it up so that the shackle lifts into here, and we just have to line up the bolt hole. So I'm gonna get the shackle mounted to the spring. I'm gonna do everything loose for right now, and I'll go back later and tighten everything up. All All right, so we're gonna see if this works. Problem is that with the arch of this spring, getting the bolt holes to line up is not straightforward. So I took a couple of 2x4s, cut them down so that I can use my pull jack to push up on the center of the spring. Now with the spring with the curve, as you push up in the middle, it's gonna push those ends out. So that's what I'm trying to do, is get it to where it straightens out the spring a little bit so that it moves the bolt point back to where it needs to be, where from I can get the actual bolt through. So I'm using the wood to block the end of the leaf spring so it's not just going straight up into the body while I try to line this up and get the spring to compress a little bit. It's definitely working. I'm almost there. I probably should emphasize, if you're doing this, be very careful. On my lift, I've actually got the frame lifted slightly off of a lift point right now. So there's that going for me. All right, so I'm making some progress on the Wagoneer here. I got the springs all installed. Everything is just loose for right now. I did go through and do a little paint on the frame on this. So obviously here's the rear springs. Still got to attach the axle to it, but that goes underneath. On the front, I've got the springs and I've got the axle set on top. So axle goes on top of the spring in the front, underneath the spring in the rear. This of course is not all attached, it's just kind of resting on there for right now. So got to get finished up with my lower plates, get the U-bolts in, and then start getting everything else connected up. So first go around doing the rear springs. I'll be honest, it was a pain in the butt. Ended up walking away for a little while, came back and was able to knock out all the other three, no problem. So I guess it's just a matter of letting frustrations get the better of you and not thinking through it properly. So sometimes it's better just to walk away and come back with a clear head. Anyways, I'm gonna get working on the rest of this, try to get these axles put in today. And got a ton of other work to do with these things, but if I can at least get it to where I can put it down on its wheels and push it off the lift, I would be very happy today. So continue on with the work. All right, so I got the front axle in, at least attached to the leaf springs here. So that's all done. At least it can be lowered down onto its own weight if I want to on the front. Still got to do the rear. One problem I did run into is I installed one of the leaf springs backwards. So where it sits on the axle or the spring is not dead center of the spring, so you do have to make sure you get the correct end on either side. I either have both of them correct or I have both of them backwards at this point. It looks to be pretty well centered in the wheel well. We'll see how it does once we put some weight on it, but yeah, the issue I had was one the opposite direction, and it kicked the axle kind of cockeyed in there. So the one side was further back, the other side was further forward, and it was messing with the springs pretty hard. So now I've got to get the rear axle rolled underneath. We'll get it rolled underneath the waggy, and then we'll drop the waggy down. There are some blocks that will go here, and then the axle. So the axle on the rear goes underneath the spring. It is a spring over design versus the front is a spring under. So it utilizes the blocks to get the proper lift height. So excited to get this thing underneath, get it attached, get it down its own weight, and just see how it looks. So let's get this thing rolled under. All right, that's gonna be the fun part, is lining everything up. All right, so the axles are in. Still got a lot of things to hook up. Still gotta do shocks, still gotta do track bars. Of course, I got to torque everything. All the bolts for the leaf springs need to be torqued down, tightened down, what have you. The front, I've still got my pitman arm, my tie rods, my steering stabilizer, my track bar, sway bar. So there's a lot to do, and then once I get that done, I can move on to working on all the brakes, front and rear. As you see, I've got parking brake lines all dangling loose back here, and they're in pretty rough shape, so I do have new parking brake cables for this thing. But I'm just excited to get this thing on its own wheels and just see how it sits. So yeah, I'm gonna put the front wheels on, drop it down, and just see what we got. All right, so for the first time in months, the Wagoneer is finally back on its own wheels under its own supported weight. So that is quite a bit different than what it used to be. That is its current ride height. Now, granted, it will settle just a little bit once we get the suspension flexed and everything, and I do have a lot of work still to do, but that is some progress right there. Still trying to figure out what I'm going to do on the powertrain on this thing, but I'll figure that out. I'm just glad to make some actual reasonable progress on this. So that's pretty much it for the suspension right now. That was a lot of work, but man, I am so glad to have that checked off the list. Finally starting to feel like I'm making some progress on this project. It has been an absolute nightmare. Not that some of that was not expected. It is a very old vehicle and you're going to run into issues, but yeah, I was just hoping things would go a little bit smoother than it has been. So anyways, one thing, check out off the list. Very happy with that. That's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Obviously, there's a lot more content coming on the Project FSJ. Also, one of the big reasons I'm trying to get this done is I've got projects to do on the other Jeeps as well, and I need the lift. So at least get the wheels and tires and suspension on it, I can start rolling it off the lift and park it somewhere else. Next video on the FSJ is going to be going through and redoing these brakes. You can see I've got the parking brake cables hanging down. I got to take care of that. This drum on the passenger side, entirely torn apart on the inside already. So I've got all new shoes, drums, hardware, parking brake cables. For the front, I've got wheel bearings, I've got calipers, I've got rotors, I've got pads. New brake lines. I'm doing just about everything on this thing. So stay tuned for the next video and we'll start tackling that kind of stuff. Thanks for watching.